Hi, Melissa. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Good, good. How's the COVID going on in Saskatchewan?
You know what? I think our numbers are good here in Regina, where we're pretty much based out of. We've had zero cases for a few weeks, so I think
Oh,
we're faring pretty good here.
and are you guys allowed back to sports?
We're opening much slower than the rest of the country, and
Yeah.
so we got the go ahead. I think it was July 6th,
Oh,
to allow all sports. So right now we're working on our return to play document because we have to submit to the government like everybody else and wait for approval. So it's a little bit slower than everybody else, but we're hoping soon.
so they didn't like just give you guys guidelines that you had to follow? You guys have
There
to,
are some guidelines, but we still have to submit to the government. Part of it, I
yeah.
think, is for insurance purposes through
Okay.
our insurance provider too. But
Yeah.
we had to there's guidelines, but we had to create our own document, right? Being as that we're contact, right? And there's a little bit more involved than something like baseball or
Yeah.
something like that. So
Do you guys have to stay in cohorts at all, or is it just
yeah, we'll have to stay cohorts. We're not sure for how long, but to be honest, we don't usually program in the summertime,
yeah.
so it's okay for now. But we can't actually book facilities without approval, so we can't actually
Oh,
even book our facility now until until our documents approved. So we want to make sure we get it right before we just go ahead and
I'm
submit.
sure some of those guys are wanting to practice or do something.
Yeah, I've had some messages from some of my players. I know that
Yeah.
they're keen and they're missing it a little bit, right? But a lot of them are multi-sport athletes too, so
Yeah.
they're going to be able to go back to their hockey and their baseball, which is good for their mental health, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
What about school? Does it look like you guys will have sports in school this year?
That's still up in the air. We don't, like from a teaching perspective, we don't even have guidelines set yet for us to
Okay.
go back to school.
Yeah.
We've been told that our sports are go. I mean, I know our football teams are organizing and getting ready for the fall, but I think
Oh,
it's just all what happens. And I don't even know what that's going to look like. We haven't really had any news, but it looks like they're planning on having sports. What that's going to
mm,
look like, I don't know. I mean, our youth
okay.
program doesn't run until the spring, so I think we're pretty safe there as long as
Okay.
everything stays as is. But
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Um, so I started a podcast uh, for people that are really heavily involved in handball, and I think anyone in Canada, when they think of Saskatchewan handball, the a big person they think about is you and the involvement you have with the Saskatchewan Team Handball Federation. I think you're the one that does the social media, correct?
I am, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Um, if you can kind of tell us how you got involved in handball and kind of your career with handball playing wise and how you got involved in coaching.
Oh gosh, well, I it all started just with teaching, right? And so here in Saskatchewan, we have a mandatory transfer process. So the school I was at was Winston Collegiate, which is just in the north end of Regina. And I had made friends with a teacher on staff, Kim Sadowski.
Mhm.
Some people might know her. She was pretty involved for a long time. And she was coaching at the time, and I traveled to an out of town tournament just to one of our smaller towns, and I love the sport. I'm from a smaller community, and we didn't have it there. I'd never seen it, never heard of it, but I'd played sports my whole life, like multi sports, pick anything that I could get involved in, and I was in it. Um, and so it started there, and then she opted to move out of country and teach, and so they needed someone to run the program, and that was me. So I do it a little bit later. If I was in my mid 20s when I actually discovered it, which is kind of unfortunate because I think I probably would have played as soon as I had found it. But
Yeah.
I started coaching at Winston Knoll, and it was quite popular there. I think we had two or three teams when I started with it, and it grew to we had 8 teams in the club.
Oh, wow.
Ranging from grades 9 to 12. And we started a tournament there. And I had a lot of really great former players as the program went on that joined in. And then, of course, I played with the women's provincial team program, and I still play. I play just rec club. I mean,
Yeah.
when you get older, as you know, it's a
Yeah.
little bit harder
Yeah.
to do things. And so I played with them for quite some time, and we traveled. We did the U.S. Nationals. We went to nationals in Canada. No huge trips, but we did participate in the Manitoba Women's League for quite some time. So we would
Yeah.
travel on the weekends as a team and go play there. And they were gracious enough to allow us to do that. It helps with the training because we're so small here.
Yeah.
We didn't have any competition. So, and then 13 years later, I was transferred to another school, which is actually closer to my house. It's in the south end of Regina. And they had a program previously and had quite a few athletes like Stony Good, who played national team for quite some time. And the program had just sort of fallen by the wayside because there was nobody there willing to take it. And I started it up again, and I'm 5 years into it. And it's always a struggle to start a new club, but I still do, but I had a really great group of, a core group of players that started the first year and ended up playing the whole time. And they're still playing. They're still playing league. They're older now. And they come back and coach too. So I think it's kind of key that you get those players coming back and helping. But yeah, that's sort of my journey. I did a little stint with the Central Canada team, and we had the traveling senior men's team, and that was it was an experience. And I did the short stint with the national team, and it was an experience to say the least. It was good. Great group of guys there too, but just wasn't what I was looking for. So.
Yeah. So from the start, were you pretty much coaching before you were playing, or just kind of at the same
It
time?
was at the same time.
Okay, so you're
Yeah.
learning the game, playing, coaching.
Learning as I go. Yeah.
Yeah. Were you coaching anything before? Or was
I did.
handball?
I coached softball at the high school I was at, and like I said, I played a lot, and it was more so playing for me. But I coached softball for a few years before I had started coaching handball, and then I actually let softball go because handball became pretty much all encompassing.
And how does school work there for handball? Like, how does your league work?
It's quite a bit different, I think, than how you guys run, right? Like you're approved through the High School Athletic
Yeah.
Association. We're not. So our struggle there is, and that's where our largest membership comes from, is through our high school or our youth league. So it's necessary for us to have somebody in the school that's willing to run it because we're not in an approved High School Athletic Association sport.
Yeah.
But we're actually quite big in Regina. We've got, I'm going to say 10 or 11 high schools, and we were slated to run in 7 of them this year with multiple, like they run as clubs, right? So you can have as many teams as you want. But it's unfortunate because I think if we were approved, the sport would explode, but there's some rules around that. And so you have to have 7 schools running for 2 years, and we had just sort of hit that mark, and then COVID came and we had to shut it down for the year. So we're hopeful it would be, because there are some really great athletes here in Saskatchewan.
Oh yeah.
Just not, we struggle every year, right? Because we don't get the optimum gym times. We have to sort of plead our case every year to let us in there.
So is everything mostly based out of Regina? Like in the school league, there's not much outside?
There is nothing outside right now, and it's we have a really strong but small cohort of volunteers.
Yeah.
And we are strictly almost all volunteer. We do have an administrative director who's fantastic, and he's been around. I think this is his 3rd year.
Okay.
But we are primarily volunteers, and so if there's no teacher in the school that's willing to do it, then no. So yeah, we're all out of Regina.
Yeah. Well, that's what I found out that's how we started, and you stay when you run everything, you stay within the area where it's easiest as well. Because again, like you said, if you don't have some crazy person in a school that's willing to organize, coach, do everything, you won't get a team out of there.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So then from the school league, when does it run?
We generally start kind of mid-March. We're at the mercy of the approved sports, right? So in order to get gym time, so probably about mid-March, and then we look to finish like last week in May, first week in June, if
Okay.
we can, again, so that we're not interfering with final exams. And so we sort of, we make it as easy as as we can for the high schools to allow us to continue the
Yeah.
way we are.
And from what I see, you guys have two categories, correct?
We
Like,
actually, well, we have three, right? So we have the women's,
yeah.
obviously, and that's, we just for numbers, sheer numbers, we go grade 9 to 12. Most of those players are still learning, so it's at no sort of detriment to their safety
Okay.
doing that. And then we have a youth B division, which is our grade 9 and 10 boys.
Okay.
We do draw in players. I did have a player who was in grade 5.
Oh,
um,
really?
yeah, we allowed him to, he was the son of a teacher at the school that I'm at.
Okay.
And he loved it, and he would be at practices. And I mean, again, like the players are you know, they're not as aggressive enough at that age level, and
Yeah.
it is sort of it's a nice community. The players were nice to him, so we have had players as young as grade 5, very rare,
Yeah.
but we've had grade 8, so grade 8, 9, 10, and then we have our senior division, grade 11 and 12.
Do you guys have mini handball or junior high school?
No, we're working on it.
Yeah.
Again, we're at the mercy of the schools. So
Yeah.
we've been working on a cadet division. I had my junior men's team run a cadet clinic
Yeah, I saw that.
uh, about, I think it was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And it went really well. But again, we're at the mercy of all the other sports, like everything else, right?
Yeah,
In the
exactly.
schools. So we're working on it.
And as well, I believe you're the one that started, you guys have a U21 league?
It was sort of, it was in conjunction, right? Like our whole
Yeah.
board sort of agreed to it. But
Yeah.
yeah, it was, our numbers were so good at the time that we just thought it was another opportunity to grow that age group. And a little bit selfishly too, because I coached the the
Yeah.
U21 men.
Yeah.
It's a great way for me to see those players and watch them develop, and sort of in a fun league. And it's, we mix the players up. We don't allow like a whole team of provincial team players to play together. We sort of, I mix the league up every year. So
Okay.
that's been running, I think now we're in our 8th year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And from what I see, you guys only allow a max number of teams, like a certain
Right.
amount of teams.
Right. And so again, it's a facility issue for us
Yeah.
too. And we haven't actually reached our max level. I think our max could be about 6 or 7 teams, which is decent, but
Yeah.
it allows us in on the evenings of Friday and Saturday, and it's quite late. Or sorry, Friday and Sunday, and it's quite late. So, and we only have maybe 2-3 hours on those evenings. So we're sort of at the mercy of our facility there too.
Okay. You got involved with the provincial team how long ago? Because you've been coaching the junior men for quite a while now.
I think I'm rolling into my 9th or 10th year. I'd have to look back and see, but I was coaching women previously. I had coached the juvenile women's program for a
Okay.
couple of years, and then moved to junior women's with Kendra Thompson and Claire
Yeah.
Doria. We were sort of a trio for a couple of years, and then and then just decided to move into coaching the men's side. I work with youth too, on and off, right, depending on who's available to coach. So some
Yeah.
years I'm doing both programs.
So why the change from women to men?
I think I I think the challenge of it was interesting to me, and I sort of wanted to go off and work with just a different group of athletes. I don't know. I think my personality, I'm a little bit more blunt and upfront, and so it just seems to work with the men's side.
Yeah.
But I mean, I liked coaching the women too. It just, there was an opportunity to coach with the men's side. And so I went ahead with it. I enjoy it. I have great players that come through the program. They're fantastic kids.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of fun. They're a lot of fun to be around.
When you started, well, for me, anyways, from the outside, it's kind of I've seen the growth of the program a lot. You guys started, I think from what I saw, the first thing was come to tournaments in Alberta,
Yeah.
and then you kind of slowly grew into now let's start working and getting over to overseas, and then to U.S. tournaments this year.
Yeah.
What was your plan, and how did you put it in place?
I think well, to be honest, initially my first year, it was sort of like starstruck, right? Like a little bit
Yeah.
dumbstruck. I wasn't really sure what my direction was, but again, there's great athletes, I think, across our country, but here where we are, we're so landlocked, and travel is so difficult for us. It's expensive to fly in, expensive to fly out. And so I had to really think about what would be the best way to grow those players. I think it's to give them as many opportunities as you can, because you can practice as much as you want, but if there's no competition, there's no chance to develop as a team. And so it's a long time coming. It takes much longer than a couple of years to grow a program and to get to those tournaments. So our first step was to come to Alberta, because it's the closest tournament that runs all the time. And we always have Heritage, right? But that's sort of hit and miss because of the travel is difficult here. And then Partial Cup, they make it so easy to get there that they do everything essentially for you, right? So, and we've looked at other international tournaments, but again, here, because the players start so late, generally 14, we're not their first sport. And so to convince parents and players to spend the kind of money it takes to actually go to those tournaments to develop is difficult. So then we opted for the States, and US Nationals was a great experience. I liked going when I was a player. It's fantastic, just the sheer number of teams. Exactly. And they're incredibly welcoming when you go. We've gone to Vancouver Cup a couple of years ago, which is a nice way to start the season for us, right? It's very comparable competition for us. And then going to Carolina Cup, again, it was another the travel down was not great. We had 36 hours of canceled and delayed flights.
I saw that.
But the tournament itself was awesome. And my team, I mean, not everybody travels all the time, right? Because of work and school, but my team thought it was fantastic, and they did well. I mean, for a junior team, and I have a couple of players that have only played for 2 months. They played 2 months of high school and then joined the program, right? So, I think I like traveling, but it's difficult with my job too, right? I only get 5 days off a year, so I sort of have to play around with that. But yeah, it's important, I think, for players to get as much different competition. It's nice to go to Canadian Nationals, but we all play each other over and over again, so you don't grow a ton from that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, from the start, there's been massive growth with Saskatchewan handball, and for me, especially the junior programs in men and women, and the youth programs. From when you started, it was a team that went, but in my opinion, they weren't going there. They were going there to win, but they weren't as successful at that time compared to now. You really built something strong, and you can see that you guys. You took, I can't remember what year it was, but it was with a very strong group of guys, and you took them from a young age. You kind of build them up until you beat us at the national championships and the finals. Did you see when you started with the group, you saw a lot of potential, and did you have a plan with them and have an alternate?
Yeah, quite a few of those boys had come from the high school I coached at. So I had several of them from the time they were 14 on. And I think it was at that point, initially we hadn't really we didn't see talent in players that were still in high school to join the junior program, and there wasn't really a youth program, so those players would play high school, and then there was kind of nothing for them except for the junior men's league. And that's when I think it might have been the year before, Brandon Chow, and maybe even the year before that, we started taking players as quote unquote red shirts to allow them to come and practice. And so we had players like Brandon Chow, who actually joined the team. I think he was in grade 11, and was playing and didn't get a lot of court time, but came with us on tournaments. And I mean, he has talent to begin with, right? He's a great athlete, just period. And then we had players like Jordan Bodner, who actually joined the program when he was in grade 10. So he was on that 2017 team as well, and just finished his junior year this year. Well, I guess finished because of COVID. So he's, and so we had a few players that we started to allow to come and either train or play with us out of high school. And I think that was sort of key too, like that whole development. But now that we sort of have a youth program, I would like to see it grow a little bit more. But so that was sort of the plan, is to allow some of those players to come and maybe even just play a few minutes at Heritage or jump on one of our trips and come with us. So that was sort of key for us, is to let them have the experience and play, because if they only play high school, I mean, it's sort of a rec league, and the rules are not clear for a lot of players, so they don't really learn a ton. It's just sort of a taste. But yeah, we had some it was just a good time. There was some really talented athletes, like Evan DeRoche had played with us all through high school. He was our center back at the time, and Spencer Neighbor, same thing. They all had come out of the high school program, those boys that I had run. And so again, talented athletes. I can't take credit for that because their athletic abilities, that whole group of boys for the 2 or 3 years it took to sort of build that were just phenomenal athletes and committed.
And they were all multi-sport athletes?
Oh yeah. Yeah, very, very rarely do we get players that aren't.
And so the big question is, a lot of people always ask this, is how do you get them to commit to handball? Because those guys they might have been multi-sport athletes, but for me, it seemed like their first choice was handball.
Yeah, yes and no. Yeah, I mean, for some of those high school athletes, I always say to them, I want them to play. So I never say you have to quit or you have to choose us first. I think it's key as a coach, especially when you're gaining those athletes later, that you allow them, especially in their high school sports, if they're basketball players, let them play. Because I think if you tell them they can't, then you lose them. So Evan is a great example. He was volleyball, basketball, you name it, in high school, and one of the best athletes in our high school. And so we just let him play. And I think they realize after high school, it's really difficult to move on and play those sports at the level that they want to play at. So just to sort of let them know that handball is there, and then they'll pick it. But you always lose some along the way too, right? Mm-hmm. Like we have, I've had a couple boys play junior hockey at the same time, and it's difficult to get them to come because it runs simultaneously with our training times. So it's frustrating at times, but you also can't take away from the fact that that's what they've grown up with. So
yeah, exactly. And so you guys started becoming successful, and now you started competing with Quebec and Alberta, and you guys started becoming that. To me anyways, it was never, you guys became where you can beat anyone. I remember it was Quebec Nationals a few years ago, and I think you were just starting to beat Quebec teams, compete with us, starting to beat us, and then you decided to take teams to Europe. Mm-hmm. Were the kids super committed to going to those kind of trips and the money that was needed for those trips?
It's a hard sell. I'd actually tried 2 years before to take teams to Partil. I'd come across the tournament. I think it might have been on your social media, and I just thought, wow, what a fantastic experience. And it didn't go. I had a parent meeting, and I think I had 3 parents show up, and we were trying to take both male and female teams at the same time, younger, but again, not their first sport. I think the first year we went, I kind of had to push a little bit. I had to be a little bit aggressive with it, and we didn't get our whole roster, which is fine because it's short halves and you don't need 16 players to go. But I think we ended up with 12 or 13 going. There was 3 or 4 that opted out, and so 12 was sort of my magic number. I said I wouldn't take because we had never been, and so I was concerned about I knew the level of play would be very high, just knowing all the European countries, and the age category we took B21. So it was a hard sell the first year. We did a ton of fundraising. We don't have any sort of funding for it, so everything is pay to play here, and so we do a lot of fundraising. We have some pretty fantastic parents too. Even this year, we had parents that were on board to do fundraising for us to go to U.S. Nationals. We were set to go. We had buses booked. We were going, and they were all set to fundraise. But again, COVID happened, which is unfortunate. There was a little bit of pushback, but I think when the parents see what they get out of the trips and the players see what they get out of the trips and the kind of the lifetime of memories you get from going, it's less difficult now for sure.
Yeah. Is overall from your side and the kid side, after when they came back, everyone say it was worth it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I have players now even, I mean, we didn't go, we took a break because we're so small and the rollover of players hadn't happened. I would go every year because I think it's awesome, but to go more than once is a hard sell. One time is good. The second time it's hard to convince them to pay the money. So we had to wait for players to roll over, and that's sort of happened now. So my hope is maybe if all is good, we could look to do it in the coming year or the following year, go again,
Yeah.
maybe with a couple of
Did
teams.
did you see a big growth after they came back? That a lot of people now started saying, "Oh, I want to go to Europe. I want to get involved more."
Yeah, yeah. Well, even I mean, I wish in hindsight that first year, but we didn't know what we were getting into, that we could have
Yeah.
taken our whole program, like the younger players as well, because that group again is the group that's kind of feeding through now, and they've aged out and they're moving to seniors. But um, it would have been a great experience. But there was the level of play after that team came
Oh
back
yeah.
had gone up exponentially, right?
Yeah.
Like they've seen what quote unquote real handball looks like and the
Yeah.
actual speed that you need to play at, and that there's players. I mean, I think we played a Swedish club team where one of their players, he was massive, ended up playing for the Swedish men's national team at Worlds. And
Oh.
so I was getting texts from the boys saying, "Don't you remember that guy?" And I was like, "Yeah, he's the one that rang up all the goals." So I think they saw what it is, what it actually is, as opposed to sort of how we function here.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't think it's a less hard sell now for sure.
And like the Partilla Cup, I mean, we travel quite a bit, but the Partilla Cup it's an event. It's just
Yeah,
not handball. There's like the the event is just incredible. And for me, I believe that gets you hooked a lot because like you said, you see handball in a whole different way.
right. Yeah, and just the camaraderie of the teams,
Yeah.
right? Everyone is so welcoming, and there's no concern about the teams sort of going and wandering around, right? Like it's
Yeah.
very safe.
Oh
It's
yeah.
very safe.
And you said you looked at different tournaments in Europe. What are some of the other tournaments you were looking at?
We had looked at maybe going to Spain one year. Our problem though is the travel. It's how to get there, right? Because we can't just fly direct,
Yeah.
uh, to wherever we're going from here. We have a very small airport, so we have to fly to one place, sometimes Calgary, Edmonton, and then hit Toronto or Vancouver.
Yeah.
Um, Even to get to Carolina Cup was the initial flight before all the problems was it was still sticky, and even to go to Myrtle Beach, we had to red eye one of our flights just to get to Toronto and then fly down. So for us, it's about the travel. I had looked at going to Denmark. I mean, I search all the time for tournaments.
Yeah.
The other problem is I am a female coach. And so the accommodations, I have to make sure that we have appropriate accommodations
Yeah.
and that we have a male with us. I always take a male. I had a fantastic manager for a couple of years travel with us. So I just have to make sure, because we can't really stay in the schools and it's not super appropriate for that to happen.
And those tournaments, they don't understand that from our part. Like you're like, oh, I have a girls team, I can't stay. Well, we can't give you your own room,
Right.
like a classroom. So you're right. It's they see it a lot differently than we see it.
Yeah.
Um, so after now you've been building, now you're starting to go to the States more.
Mm-hmm.
How did you pick the Carolina tournament over Chicago or California?
We actually we got an invitation to go. I got a direct email. And
Oh, okay.
so again, I the teacher side of me likes to have the whole year planned.
Yeah, yeah,
And I like to be able to lay out the plan again, because we're not the first choice sport. I like to give the boys a schedule, and generally I function like that. But
yeah,
this tournament popped up and we discussed it as a team. I always want to make sure my team's sort of involved in decisions like that, right? Because they are functionally, they're adults.
yeah,
And so we talked about it, and not everybody wanted to go, and that's fine, right? Again, it wasn't the type of tournament we needed a 16-man roster for.
yeah,
We ended up taking some of our younger players, which was nice because they hadn't traveled and hadn't really sort of seen the level of play. And there was some good teams. That New York Athletic Club team was there. They're very big, very large
yes,
men in comparison to us,
yeah, yeah,
fully grown men. Anyway, so it was good. I mean, it was a bit of an eye opener for some of them. Some of them have played against those guys before,
yeah,
so it was nice. We had a nice mix of some older players. Both of my goalies for the last couple of years have been high school kids, so they were in grade 12. For as big as they are, they're both well over 6'2"
yeah.
and still growing. So it was massively a good experience for those two in particular. I think they've grown a ton in the last couple of years just from the few trips that we've done. But Carolina Cup was nice, and we'd never been to North Carolina. A lot of the boys
Beautiful.
wanted to go, and and see some games. Like it becomes an experience too, right? Like we went to basketball games, they went to a hockey game, we tried barbecue. So
Yeah. Did,
that's part of the sell, right?
did you go to the Jordan or not the North Carolina Basketball Museum?
We didn't, they weren't super pumped about that. They wanted to
Oh,
go
really?
and to around some of those other places too, but
Uh,
we got to a game. I tell you what, though, driving a 15 passenger van down an interstate is not my
yeah.
favorite thing to do
Yeah.
by any stretch. And I think I flat out told them in Detroit that we would not be doing that. I would rather rent something. I'm not driving through Detroit with giant people in the back of a 15 passenger van.
Exactly.
But yeah, we toured around. We checked out some things. Some of them went to a hockey game. A group of us went to a small little restaurant that was recommended. But again, the people in North Carolina were super welcoming.
Yeah.
And it was a good tournament. It wasn't a huge tournament, but it was enough for us. I think the level of play was decent and it was comparable. We won a couple of games. So
Yeah, because you guys lost quarterfinals to the team that won.
no, we played the New York Athletic Club in the semifinals.
Oh,
We made it
okay.
through quarterfinals and we played them in the and just the size difference. And I mean,
Yeah.
they are jam packed with former and current national
Oh, yeah.
team players. So, but they were good to us, right? Like I think they realized. And Jordan Filthian is on there, and I know him, and so they were good to us. And then we
Yeah.
played the university team, and they have a couple of really talented players on that team, and we were close with them actually. It was within 3 until probably the last 5 minutes, and then nope.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There was a lot of people talked about the upset in the finals that
Yeah, it was a
that
good
beat you.
game.
Were you guys allowed to stick them?
I'm trying to even remember. It's so hard because every tournament is different, right? No, we weren't.
No.
There was no stick 'em down there. Yeah.
Okay. Um, and the plan for you guys were to go to USA Nationals. I don't know if you know this, but you know that you guys were like on the bubble to be in the elite side.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a bit of a panic about that.
Okay.
I mean, it's nice, right? Like it's a
Yeah.
nice idea. My preference would be to just stick with the open division. Not that I
Yeah.
don't think it would be a good experience for my team because I had enough players that had played enough that it wouldn't crush them, right? But
Yeah.
I've seen the elite division, and I don't know if that's quite where we belong. But it was a nice nod for sure.
Yeah, because I remember just on the U.S. sites because we couldn't. We were supposed to go, and
Yeah.
we traveled to the states a few times to make it, but it ended up being the same time as our high school provincials, so we couldn't go. And then the talk was you guys were the next seed
I
to
know,
move up.
and
So
it wasn't our
I'm like, that's pretty cool.
It was cool. It wasn't actually our intention was never to qualify for the elite side, obviously, right? Because I think our senior men's team is much more equipped to probably function in that category than we are. But yeah, it was a nice nod. I was waiting, watching the site because
Yeah.
I just thought, geez, can we just maybe opt out and have a really good open side? But
Yeah.
again, it was nice for the nod.
Yeah. Now, a couple of questions about you coaching. So, I believe that you have a certain philosophy in your coaching. Your team is always fast,
Yeah,
always very, very aggressive on offense.
yeah.
Always a team that score. I always say, when you play Sask, you're going to be in the high 20s, 30s. Is that how you coach?
Yeah, I always look for, well, I mean, I do initial sort of fitness testing to the best of our capability. We don't have a lot of resources here. So
Yeah.
I have a sort of standardized, I map out sort of what I'm looking for at the beginning of the season. And I push the first wave, second wave offense quite
Yeah.
a bit and push the fast break quite a bit because again, here we start much later.
Yeah.
A lot of times when we get players just moving into the program in their first year, they don't have the technique, the standard sort of handball technique. So,
Yeah.
I mean, you can teach technique somewhat. So if you have the speed and the aggressiveness, then you can sort of work with that. So yeah, we push. I know that we're known for that. We push the speed as much as we can, right? And I know the boys in 2016, 2017 were particularly fast, and then we had Matt Jessup join the team, and I don't even know where the speed comes from. He's
Yeah.
unbelievably fast.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. um, do you work a lot on technique with your players?
We do. We spend, I mean, we don't get a lot of, we're at the mercy of facilities. So I'm lucky enough. My high school, I booked the gym there.
Yeah.
It's small. It's very small. It's about half the size of a full handball court,
Yeah.
width and length. So we will spend time on technique, but we only get maybe one practice a week for 2 hours, which is why we play in our senior men's league as well. So it takes more than a year, sometimes more than 2 years to teach the techniques and to
Yeah.
teach systems, right? So the rollover of players often dictates what we can kind of accomplish, but we spend a little bit of time. I kind of changed the program based on who's coming in and what they need. So
Okay.
I mean, the last couple of years I haven't needed to spend as much time on technique, but again, we've had a big rollover of players again, so
Yeah.
we might have to roll back and look at some more technique things again. But it's and playing to the player's strength too, right?
Yeah.
We only get them for a short time, so when they graduate high school, I get them for maybe 3 years, and that's then they move on to senior. So it just
Okay.
depends on what the players need.
Okay. Um, then the other big thing I noticed is that you have, as a coach, what I really like about your style is your players buy into you. I believe that, like, you see it when you guys are at a tournament and we're there. They really believe in you as a coach, and they buy into everything you say. Uh, do you work a lot on your relationship with the players and make sure that you guys have a close bond?
I think, well, it happened actually in 2017. I think, and before that too, right? But I think, again, it's the group of players too.
Yeah.
I like to push, I don't want to say friendship, but at least a mutual respect amongst each other.
Yeah.
And it works sometimes, it doesn't, right? You don't have to like everybody, but you do have to work together as a team. But in particular, in 2017, 2018, that year, it was a difficult year. I think, like, I had lost my mom, and I had taken on the national team prior to that, and then I was doing Central Canada, and there was all these things sort of happening. And then I think the group of boys had come through the youth program, and the push for we have a family first philosophy, and we now
Yeah.
imprint it on all of our things. And
I
that
was going to ask you about that. Yeah.
it came out of the Humboldt Broncos crash, because we actually had a player who had a family member on the bus.
Oh.
It happened just right before nationals, if you remember.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I had gotten a hold of Hummel in Alberta and said, "Hey, can you hook us up with some shirts?" And so kind, gave us a discount. I explained the situation, that we wanted to change up our warm-ups for that tournament.
Yeah.
And so we really kind of pushed that family first philosophy. And I even when I program at the beginning of the year, I program in team nights, and we do different things together. And I change it up every year. Like, we do car rallies around town, just to make sure that, and not everybody can come all the time, but to make sure that they spend time together outside of practice. Because I always think, like, a team will function much better on the court and in training if they are willing to spend time with each other. And you see the friendships grow. Like, they come from different schools, but I can see on our social media, right, because they're all on there, that they're posting and they're golfing with each other and they're doing things. So I think, more so than the actual wins and losses, I think my pride in the team is to watch them bond, because I think that's super important. It's a lifetime friendship in some cases, right? So.
Well, you see it, and again, I follow you guys on social media, and some of the players follow us, and we follow them, and I mean, they love to hug each other. That's what I notice.
They do.
Yeah, you're right. But it's good. It's nice to see the bond that they have, and I mean, I think that's why you guys are getting so successful. Is that not just a handball, but you're building a culture, and they're buying into each other, into their coach, and you see them, and that's how commitment starts, and them wanting to be successful for each other. So,
well, even
I
on our
mean,
girls' side too, right?
yeah.
Like,
Oh,
the
yeah.
girls are bonded with each other too, and it's the same sort of, like, we like to call it a Sask thing, the hugging, and maybe it is. I don't know. Maybe it's something in the water here, but
No, yeah.
girls are bonded with each other as well, and they do team nights too, and they're really close with each other too. So it's
Yeah.
really
No,
you
it's
know,
great to see. Now, at the point you're becoming a very successful coach, you can see that now in Canada you're getting recognized as a coach. You took the junior men's national team.
Mm.
You mind if I ask you a couple questions about that?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So you guys had a competition at the same time as
Right.
national championships. And at one point, I think you were going to go and you were going to get another coach to coach the SAS team, but
Right.
you decided to not go. what happened with you with the national team? Because I saw that you guys did a camp, and then it kind of someone else took the team. You were
Mhm.
here, and then never saw you with the national team anymore.
No, well, I initially when I wanted to jump on the national team, I was looking to learn more, right?
Yeah,
It's limited here, and we're limited sort of with our resources in Canada. And so I had initially just sent an email and said, hey, I'm looking to learn some more. I'd like to work with, and I picked the team just because of that's what I coach. I'd like to work with U21 men, and I was just looking to work with them. I
okay,
wasn't looking for a head coach position. And then I got
okay,
an email saying we'd like to offer you this. And I thought about it probably for a good 6 weeks before I said yes.
okay.
And then I said yes. And I think I watched Alexi's podcast as well. And I think
Yeah,
he sort of hit the nail on the head that, especially here, because there was sort of no precedence here, like there's no one to ask here,
yeah,
right, in Saskatchewan about how the national team functions. And I do all the planning for my junior men's team and all the travel, and I book all the tickets. But it was unclear to me that that role was going to be expected of me
yeah,
when I did it. And so I had actually created a whole program where I had, I was going to be in BC at one point. That's where my family is. I'm actually just here. Uh, my dad and my whole
mhm,
family's out there. So um, I was going to be in BC for a visit, and I had emailed and said, I'm going to be out there. I'm coaching the national team. Are there players there? I'm willing to run a camp. And they just didn't have the players. So I had kind of set out what I thought would be a decent program, but it was never made clear to me sort of how the communication was going to be done. It was very sort of cloudy.
yeah,
And I planned the whole camp here. And again, it went well. There was good players,
yeah,
really nice group of boys that showed up, um, but still didn't have a date for any tournaments. And functionally, that IHF trophy tournament usually happens, correct me if I'm wrong, fall,
yeah,
September, October.
yeah.
And so I had, as a teacher, I only get 5 days off here. That's it. And I actually have to earn one of those days by coaching 125 hours.
Oh wow.
So, and then the other 3 I have to pay for. So it's $1,100 every time I take those 3 days off a
Yeah,
year. And so I had sort of functioned with my provincial team, and I'd taken a couple days here and there and done the camp, and then they announced the date for the tournament, and it was the same time. And so part of my philosophy, and I say this to my players all the time, and even to my students, if I make a promise to you, I won't break that promise.
yeah,
And so I had said to my team, uh, this is what's happened. I said, I promised you that I would go with you to nationals. We made that promise for some of you 3 or 4 years ago. It's up to you. And they, again, we discussed as a team, and I'm more connected to the provincial team boys than I am to the national
yeah.
team. And so Pat Stanley went in my place, and I had only been given until the end of June with that team. And then that was it.
So they give you
So
a deal for one tournament?
pretty much, yeah. Or even no tournament, right?
No,
So
yeah,
they had given me, I'd asked for an outline of sort of what my expectations were, and I
yeah,
was given I don't know, it was contract, an outline
okay,
that outlined it until the end of June of that year. And so when the end of June came, functionally I was done.
wow.
And then I didn't receive any communication for a while from them. So
Oh,
I
okay.
mean, the experience itself was interesting. It was good. The players were fantastic. It was kind of it was, but the work itself, like, I commend Nat and you and Sylvain and everyone that's worked with those programs for multiple
Uh,
years, because I I think it would be nice to have something in writing outlined for the
yep,
coaches. And again, I don't ever look to get paid for what I do, because let's be honest, handball doesn't have the money for that.
yeah.
But it was a heck of a lot more work than what I had signed up
Well,
for
yeah,
sure.
it's different when you run a provincial program because you have everyone there and you're
Yeah.
flying from one place. But now you have you at the camp. Our players decided they wanted to do national championships.
Mhm.
You have players from Quebec, I think from Winnipeg. Now you have to
Right.
get them tickets. You got to get them places to stay and then arrange everything. There's so much work to it. I
Yeah.
still don't understand why the coaches have to do it, but
Yeah. Well, and I think it's just it's the the small sport, right? Like
Yeah,
I would love to have the resources of hockey or basketball, but
yeah,
it's just not a reality. And I do it for my provincial team too. And but it was it and without solid timelines, and that's not really the fault of the CTHF
no,
by
it's
any
not.
stretch, right? Like
Yeah,
without any solid timelines and things just being thrown at you, it's not fair. It wasn't fair to the players at the time. I would have
yeah,
loved to have gone because I was excited and the team was good. They were much better than what they showed at the tournament, I think.
yeah,
But I even had players, like we had a couple players that were going to be on the roster,
yeah.
and they opted out. And that was that whole year of Family First. It was
Okay,
a year for my team too, and I didn't feel like with all of that going on as a coach, it would be the right decision for me to walk away from those 16 boys when I had spent so much time with them, and it was a rough year
yeah,
for our whole team. So it was in the best interest of the group of boys that I had committed to for years, right?
yeah. And I think a hard thing too is like you had one camp with them, right? You had a weekend,
Right.
I believe.
Yeah.
So I mean, like you're going to play teams that maybe train more, but I mean, like the states now are bringing more U.S. or European players, so
Mhm.
you got to be able to prepare more. And
Right.
you're 100% right that no one knows dates, and that's not CTHF's fault at all.
No.
It just I still don't understand how hard it is to set dates for a tournament. I don't understand why it takes them so long to say, well, every 2 years there's the IHF challenge. I don't understand why they can't just set a date.
Well, and I probably, like, I mean, I was off, I did receive another offer to coach again, not as a head coach, as an assistant coach with
Yeah.
another team, and I turned it down.
Okay.
Um, again, just it's maybe later on I would be happier to do it, but I just need there to be, again, from the IHF and from some of those
Yeah.
organizations, I just need a more solid plan. And you're right, it's not,
Yeah.
we're not a country that can function last minute.
Yeah.
There's countries that can because they do it full time and those coaches, it's their
Exactly.
jobs, but it's not
Yeah.
feasible for our coaches. And again, I commend all the coaches that have done it for multiple years because we all have
Yeah.
full-time jobs on top of it. So
Yeah. Well, that's what Alexei said. He's like, the only way it could be successful is you have to have someone that's full time in handball in Canada or something to be able to do it.
yeah,
Because as a teacher, you can't just say, "Hey, in 2 weeks, I need a week off."
yeah, they don't like when you do that.
Yeah,
They're not
yeah,
happy for sure.
yeah. Exactly, exactly.
So yeah,
Okay,
that's the answer. I mean, there's things I would do differently, but I was happy with the camp. It went really well, and
yeah.
the kids that were there, they liked it. So
Yeah, I watched videos. You had some clips, and it seemed like you had some of the best players out of Quebec come.
mhm,
So it was good. And I mean, you guys have some great players too. So
yeah,
it was a good team. You can just see when you watch the games, they just didn't know how to play with each other.
right. Yeah, that was
And
it.
yeah, and that's the thing in Canada. We have from Alberta to Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Quebec. We all have different styles of handball. So
Exactly.
it takes time to get them used to each other.
Yeah.
Um, Now, you started, and I mean, we've done it as well. You started going to USA Nationals and kind of making that a priority over Canadian Nationals.
Mhm.
Why is that?
Well, part of it is, again, like I had said previously, you
Yeah,
have to allow your players to play other. I think that in terms of developing handball in Canada, there has to be more opportunities for us to play different teams, right? Like
yeah,
it's nice to see everyone, and it's a small community, and everybody knows each other. But to see the same players over and over again, um, if with our limited resources and asking our players to pay as much money as they do,
yeah,
my preference is to allow them to go to a competition where they're going to grow more as players overall. So that when they do move to perhaps our senior men's team, or if they try out for a Canadian team, that they're better prepared, right? Just for us, simply practicing and then going to a nationals where there's three teams. Like you've
yeah,
been to those nationals. I
yeah,
remember a day where we could go and there was 11 teams there.
yeah, yeah,
Right, where there was and I would probably feel better about going to those tournaments, but the cost for us to go to someplace like Quebec, for example, is
yeah,
the same as it would be or more than to go to US Nationals, right? So this year we tempered it at US Nationals, and I mean we had a decent team and we could have done fairly well at US Nationals, I think.
yeah,
um, but again, it's difficult, right? Like I agree with Alexi somewhat that it should just it should be open. They should start functioning making Canadian nationals much more like US nationals, where it's open and they can just allow any teams to go, right? But we have to build the sport more. We can't just keep functioning with a 14 nationals at the junior
Yeah,
level anyway.
I agree with you 100%. What do you think needs to be done though? Do you like, because I'll bet you after last year you were at USA Nationals, your players come back and just like ours and say, that's way better than Canadian Nationals. We see different teams. You're in Myrtle Beach. You're in a beautiful complex. And then for us, it happens that when you come up with a budget and the plan, they're like, well, why do we need to go to Canadian Nationals? Why can't we go to US Nationals?
Yeah, we have, again, I discussed with my players, right? It was a
Yeah,
team decision. I don't just unilaterally tell them this is what we're doing.
yeah,
But it's better in terms of the amount of teams, and the opportunities to play teams that are more comparable, right? Like there's an ebb and flow to every program. If you look at Alberta, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Quebec, particularly in Saskatchewan, Quebec, we have more of an ebb and flow, right? Like there's years where we are maybe not as competitive as everybody else. And it's numbers for us, right? Like
yeah,
we have very few players to pick from some years. So for us, it's more comparable competition, right? Like there's some years we can't compete with the upper level teams. And so it's hard to continue to go to those Canadian nationals and tell your players that we should go when they kind of already know what the result is going to be.
yeah,
And I think I would like to see, and it's hard because we're so small. I think the growth in the sport from starting a program, cross country program that includes younger kids, right?
yeah,
Like a push for younger kids to join the game. Because if you look at the larger sports like a football, a hockey, a basketball, they push those programs, but it comes from a national level. It's hard as on a provincial level to just implement those. So,
yeah,
and have it be consistent, right?
yeah,
So the overall growth in Canada, we have to start those players young, and I understand why we're small, but we're very fixated on the older age categories where
yeah,
those won't exist, right? At some point, if we just carry on, everything will become defunct, right?
exactly.
So I think it would be nice to see a national push for younger age categories and to start those kids younger. And we're trying here, but again, it's a struggle as a smaller province. And I know Manitoba has the same problems that we do. So does BC.
Yeah.
The Atlantic provinces, same thing, right? Like some of them only have one age category to pull from. So.
Yeah, you're right. But the hard thing is, and I talked to a lot of people at the States because they ask how you guys did. If you can run a camp,
Mm-hmm.
but these kids are not just going to keep on showing up to camps.
No.
You have to have events for them. You have to make it fun and worthwhile. You have to have something for them to catch on to.
Yeah.
And that's the problem is, yeah, you can go to 100 schools, but then they love it. Okay, well, what do we have? Well, nothing. I just wanted to do a clinic. They have to have events.
Yes.
And so I think that's a huge thing. A thing about it, though, is we're way bigger than the USA when it comes to number-wise in handball.
Yeah, for sure.
But how come only 4 teams show up to national championships?
I think it is. I think it's that knowledge that for a long time, and it's changing back and forth. I mean, Manitoba brought a really great team to the last junior nationals. That was a fantastic final to watch.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think it's that idea that I think the smaller provinces, it's hard to sell kids. I mean, a junior team from BC, for instance, to travel to Quebec to spend that money to play teams like Alberta, who are traditionally very strong, and Quebec teams who are traditionally very strong. Yeah. It's a hard sell to get them to spend that money when there's another alternative. So, I mean, we don't have enough teams to tier, but even to just create, much like the US has, an open side.
Yeah.
And it's senior, junior, and U2s, right? And maybe the idea of an elite side where it's an opt-in thing for the first year, or there's a play-in situation like they have in the States. But I don't think we have the numbers to do that right now.
Well, that's the thing is, I agree. And Alexi said that too. You have to kind of, some provinces, like, they just don't want to go and play the top teams because that year they're not as strong.
Right.
You find that if there was, though, you can see like more provinces wanting to go to national championships?
I think so, right? And then as well, right? Like if we're looking from a national team perspective, if we can get as many teams as we can to
Yeah,
show up for an open senior junior division and then just have youth be separate,
yeah,
uh, it would take away the whole idea of trying to find players, right? Like the
yeah,
coaches could go there. It would be much cheaper for a coach to fly to a nationals and observe players and
exactly.
shoulder tap for an upcoming camp than it would be to try and seek out players from wherever in Canada. So I think the idea of tiering the junior senior into an open division and let you opt in, right? Like a tier one senior junior, tier two senior junior, and then a youth division separate makes
Yeah,
much more sense. I think because in Saskatchewan, if we have a year where we're developing, it's hard to convince those boys to go and and play like in Alberta, who again is very strong, Quebec very strong, and then just to know that you're going to go and maybe get fourth or fifth when there's an
yeah,
opportunity to be more successful and to have a better game in a
yeah,
tier two division, right?
yeah. What do you think that our experience at national championships, like the way that we run our events, needs to improve a lot?
Well, I mean, in an ideal utopian world, it shouldn't
Yeah,
just be 3 days, right?
yeah,
If we're running a true nationals, it should be, it's not good for the health of the players, I think, to
yeah,
play a game at that speed where you're playing two, and let's be honest, sometimes three games in a day. It's not good for them. It's not good for their
no,
bodies. The longevity of the athlete needs to be a consideration there too, right? So in an ideal world where everyone can take time off, it would be nice to have it run over the week and have it be a full event. But uh, it's not, again, feasible because you can't convince people to take a whole
yeah,
week off just to go to a Canadian Nationals
yeah.
right now.
It's funny you say that because in June you kind of put on your Instagram when you guys won nationals, and there's a guy on crutches. There's a guy with I think a cast on, and I was looking at that picture when you put it up. I'm like, whoa, they had injuries.
Oh, and I have never, in all of the time I've coached anything, seen that many injuries. Like I
Yeah,
actually thought we were done for the weekend because Brandon was at the hospital, and then we
yeah,
had our wing tear his Achilles, and another one
yeah.
with stitches. Like I think we had 3 or 4 sent to the hospital that weekend.
Yeah, when you look at the pictures, it doesn't look like you won national
No,
championships.
no, I
It's
know.
quite funny. Yeah. Uh, uh, um, so, so with your players, they have difficulties when they look and they know that it's kind of a developing year, and you kind of show them what you're looking at, and sometimes they say, "Well, I don't really want to go to Alberta if we know we're going to lose to them, or go to Quebec." And so you have players that kind of say that to you guys.
I don't know. They don't outwardly say it. I
Yeah,
think it's a thought in their head. I also think too, it's the whole idea of if you show them U.S. nationals, which now they've gone and seen, right? Because as
yeah,
soon as we did that, the senior men were pumped. Like the
yeah.
senior
They were
men were
going this year,
going.
right?
We had all of Saskatchewan going this year. The girls
Yeah,
were going. Everybody was going. It's that idea that you get to see people you've never played before,
yeah,
right? Um, so I think that's the larger consideration, more so for the junior men. But like the senior men here, they don't have competition. They play junior men. Well, they should beat us, and they do.
yeah.
Um,
They're a
so
good
it's
team, though.
right. Like they should beat us, and they
Yeah,
do.
they're a good team.
Yeah, they are a good team. They're a good team.
Yeah,
But like when they saw U.S. nationals, that was as soon as I got home. That was the discussion, right? And we were all traveling together. Everybody was pumped. So I think more so than now that we're further along in our program, it's less of a consideration. But for us, it's the idea of the development of the whole player as opposed to
yeah,
going to the same tournaments all the time because it
yeah.
doesn't develop them as players. They see the same teams over and over again, right?
Yeah. It's weird when you go to nationals, and even before you see rosters, you already
Mhm.
know who you're
I know
worrying
there's no
about.
team.
On okay, we know this team has this player, this player, this player, this player, and it doesn't change over years.
No, and we used to plan it that way. I could
Yeah,
name off the entire Alberta roster before we even arrived for years and years and years and say, this player will be here. This is what you need to do. Like,
yeah,
right.
yeah,
So,
yeah. What do you think of? And there was a lot of talks, but actually CTHF turned it down to just do a North American national, like a one big tournament,
mhm.
and then you have somehow you spurt out to have a Canadian, a U.S. champion, and then a North American champion
Like you're talking about having the US and the Canadian champions.
together.
I don't think that's a horrible idea at the state we're at. I don't know if the US would buy into it, right?
No,
Because
they bought into it.
yeah, well then I think
Yeah,
it would be interesting. We need to change something, right?
yeah.
Because um like the junior category is just going to be gone soon,
What
right?
did you, I don't know if you knew, did you hear about this year's registration for
Yeah.
national championships? There was everything was going to get canceled no matter what, except I think the senior category, because we were going to go because we couldn't go to US, and Toronto was going to go.
Yeah.
And the juniors was, there was just our girls, no guys, and the youth, there was no one going.
Yeah. Well, even I mean, we've had years in Saskatchewan we've hosted and there's been no girls side.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So
So
that's not new. Something needs to change. And I don't like,
yeah,
again, there's a ton of theories, but I don't know what the correct
no,
answer is. We
exactly.
need to try something though.
Yeah, exactly. So going forward, what's the plan with you with your teams, and like, is there like a 5-year plan with Saskatchewan handball and what they want in their growth of the sport?
Well, I think right now we sort of shifted our larger concern to, I guess, call them our recreational programs, building of membership, right? So
Yeah,
things like a cadet program, working more with our leagues, looking at player satisfaction. How do we keep people around? I think that's for us a larger concern. Not that our elite side isn't a concern, but I mean, Rob and Craig and Caitlin Dodman and Alyssa Hofford, they're doing a great job on the women's side, and our men's side is much more stable now, right? Like we've seen a consistent team coming out of the senior category for a few years now. The junior program's been around. So
yeah,
those are much more stable, but we need those those other programs to function in order to feed,
yeah,
to pull players in. So right now, I think what we're really focusing on is sort of keeping our players around and building our recreational side and getting more people involved. But right now with COVID, it's sort of up in the air,
yeah,
right? Because if our junior program generally starts beginning of September, that's probably not going to be realistic for us. It's sort of up in the air. We can't really plan a whole lot, so it's a waiting game for sure.
yeah.
It's a waiting game, but that's
Uh,
sort of what we're looking at.
yeah, I don't think you'll be traveling to the States anytime soon.
Probably not. No,
Yeah, so Canadian Nationals might be
it
successful
might
this
be
year.
much bigger this year. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Um, are you on the board?
I am on the board. Yeah.
Okay. And you guys meet monthly?
Um,
Usually, obviously, COVID's different,
yeah,
but
less so now. We've been doing some Zoom meetings. Like we haven't sort of just quit. We are meeting.
yeah,
And mostly talking about return to play, right? Because that's our larger
okay.
concern right now. But I mean, here in Saskatchewan, people on the board are also coaches and refs. And like I said, we have a small cohort of very dedicated volunteers, and then we have
Yeah,
some great parents and some former players that jump in. And but yeah, we have been meeting, but it's generally to talk about return to play and
yeah.
what will that look like.
Last few questions. Are you guys planning to have the Heritage this year, or is
Well, we're planning on it, but again,
it just
facility
depends?
booking is up in the air until we can get that return to play document. So, I mean, I think Heritage is a great event. It's been around. We're moving
Yeah,
into almost 50 years now. And so it's sort of one of the constant tournaments, at least in the country. We'd like to see BC's sort of played around with coming a couple years, but
yeah,
we would like to see them show up and get a few more. I've invited some American teams, but again, the travel is difficult here, right?
yeah,
So it's usually Manitoba and Alberta.
yeah. Um, Throughout your coaching career, do you have one game as a coach that, from the time when you retire from handball, the one game that you're always going to talk about?
Well, I have a few games because I've had some characters on my team before. So,
Yeah.
in terms of pride, it has to be the final for nationals, right?
Yeah.
Like that was, and it was especially uh, great for me because my dad had actually never seen me coach or play,
Oh, really?
and he was there for his 75th birthday, so he was in the stands.
And it was his 75th birthday?
It was his 75th birthday.
Well, congrats on that. That's great.
So that was probably pretty memorable. I think anytime that the team feels successful, I get excited for it, right? So even if
Yeah.
we don't win a tournament, when they're excited, I'm excited. And that's, I think, what keeps me coaching, right? Is the idea of watching, because it's not always about the win, but that was the pride that they had in themselves. And just watching the stands, right? Like there was, I mean, we're not big, but we had quite a fan base there for that.
You couldn't sit.
No.
Yeah, it was full. Yeah. Um, and do you have any kind of thoughts of not coaching, or you have a long-term plan?
Uh, I mean, I feel like at the end of every season, I feel so tired
Yeah, you
to
quit
be.
every season.
Yeah, I quit at the end of every year, but
Yeah,
again, it's I think I'll stop when it stops being enjoyable for me. And right now, I still like it. I mean, I'm a teacher, right? So I
yeah,
must like being around kids. I always say when I'm even teaching, when I'm find it less enjoyable or I'm not having fun anymore, then I think it's
yeah,
time to retire. So I'm not quite at that point yet, but I also know that there needs to be a new wave sort of shuffled in too, right? So if
yeah,
someone's willing to come and take over,
yeah.
happy to do it, right? Like I'm happy to have someone come and sit on the bench with me and learn and ultimately take it over. And we're still looking for that person for the youth category. So
But
hope.
you seem to always have some of your players come back, because last few years at youth, you haven't been the head coach. You're there, and it seems like you're mentoring more than actually coaching.
Yeah, we've had some, I mean, it depends on the year, right? Like youth is hard because it's only a couple of months and it happens while the junior categories are going on and we need the
Yeah,
gym time and I have the gym time. So yeah, we had a few players. We had Matt Jessup do it and Brandon Fisk, and we try and insert those players, but again, they're busy. Most of them are in school. They have jobs. It's a big commitment to, it's a huge commitment to
yeah,
coach.
yeah.
It's far more than being in the gym for a couple of hours a week
Oh,
and coaching.
exactly.
It's planning and all of
Yeah,
that. So I think sometimes they realize it's more than what they had sort of signed up for.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. Well, I won't keep you much longer, but I just want to say, like, I commend you and Sask Handball in the growth. Like, I think you personally have done a fantastic job with the program. We always say this in Alberta. There's so many great handball players that are starting to come out of Saskatchewan handball, and you say that there's great athletes, but there has to be someone that teaches those athletes how to play handball and believe in the sport. And uh, just kudos to you and the way that the growth of handball and the way that SAS handball is working and growing all parts of handball. It's good for everybody. So, um, yeah, thank you for this podcast. And
well, I
oh,
appreciate the opportunity. I love these. I think it's great that these conversations are happening and people kind of get to see the different aspects because I mean we only see each other at nationals and
yeah,
it's
and
it's fight
nationals is
time.
not a
It's fight
fun
time
time.
then.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So just know that yeah, we only see each other in nationals, and it's a rivalry, obviously. But we, like myself in Alberta, we respect you and all the coaches and what you guys are doing for it, because it only makes it better for everybody. So
Well, I think it's great that we have these programs and we kind of look to each other for
yeah,
help, right? Too. I think that's important as well to grow as a sport across Canada that we have that. So thank
yeah,
you for having this sit
yeah.
down with me. It was great.
Yeah, thank you. I won't tell you who, but there's one of your players is doing this tomorrow.
Oh,
So there's
really?
yeah.
Like one of my
So
current junior
one
players?
of the I'll just say one of the players that won nationals with you.
Oh, it's got to be Brandon.
Yeah, yeah. So we're
Come
gonna
on
do
now,
it with it.
Mike.
Well, we're gonna do with. I want to do it with some of the players from
Yeah.
their experiences, but yeah, we have him on tomorrow.
Well, it's good that I said nice things about him then,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. I'll make sure he says nice things about you.
Okay, well, you guys take care in Alberta. Stay safe, and we hope to see you guys soon.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Okay, bye. Take
Bye.
care.